How are you doing? We Japanese also have the sense of discrimination as other countries' nations do. As this is a pretty normal sentiment that more or less people have in their mind in any countries know exceptionally. The feature of sense of discrimination in Japan is suppression against minorities. The feature of Japanese sense of discrimination is different from racism that drives people to abuse someone belonging to targeting race. Even if you are non-Japanese, if you understand Japanese culture, Japanese tradition, Japanese custom, and you make effort to become a member of Japanese society, you are welcomed as a member of Japanese society. We don't develop an attitude of exclusiveness to foreigners for different skin colors and racial minority, but we have a strong sense of discrimination towards people who have the strong opposite stance against majority opinion. So there may be a case that a foreigner is abused who have the thoughts incompatible with Japanese society. So specifically, majority thoughts are very strong in the Japanese society and seen as justice in Japan. So Japanese people's opinion tends to lean towards one stance, one theory, and make a strong sympathy group in a discussion or something. And people who believe the majority thoughts is justice start to attack minority that takes the totally opposite stance against majority's thoughts in a manner that they don't accept any opposite opinions. So minority is outnumbered by majority in Japan. Naturally, minorities gradually hesitate to speak their opinion publicly, and majority's opinions control discussion unhealthy. This oppression unfairly from majority thoughts is what is called peer pressure, as you know. The ratio of this peer pressure occupied in a Japanese society is pretty big, and each community sprinkled in a Japanese society forms strong sympathy group inside, and people in the community come to have sense of privilege, like we are justice. So before we know it, we are caught up in the atmosphere that majority opinion is justice, and the minority comes to feel like their opinions are just wrong, and they pretend they insisted on nothing about it. So looking around public places in Japan now, the majority of people wears a mask, no exceptionally. On the other day, the Japanese government announced like we don't have to wear a mask wherever we go if we have appropriate social distancing from each other from the viewpoint of, dangerousness of heat stroke in this season, because Japanese summer is really, really hot. But the majority of people doesn't stop wearing masks wherever they go. You may understand this situation if you walk around Tokyo in Japan. Most of Japanese people neatly wear masks on the street in spite of this extreme hot temperature outside in Japan. So they wear masks not because of fear of coronavirus infection, but they wear masks because they want to be evaluated. They want to be thought that they belong to majority opinion in order to feel safe in the Japanese society. So in contrast to this situation in Japan, there were a certain number of people who didn't wear a mask in public places right in the middle of the really terrible situation, terrible coronavirus situation in the United States, although the American government forced people to wear masks wherever they went. So I think this difference comes from the viewpoint of society that accept diversity or not. So the atmosphere controlled by peer pressure can compare favorably with a kind of dictatorship, in the sense that people's thought is strongly controlled in the Japanese society. So always, people with minority's opinion is overwhelmed by majority's opinion, and this atmosphere creates illusion that minority opinions is wrong. A dictatorship as a Japanese unique peer pressure aims its attack at people's behavior that is not allowed by social consensus in the Japanese society. For example, since Western business custom was encouraged to be taken into a Japanese business scene, Japanese society, like a customer is not a god. And the relationship between the servicer and the customer is a 50-50. Japanese society has hated people who make a persistent complaint like a harassment to a store or restaurant as an unreasonable complainer. Before we know it, the Japanese society has included people with a justifiable complaint to a servicer in the same definition of a harassing complainer, and peer pressure also aims its target at people with justifiable complaint no matter who he is, who she is. And people unreasonably give a harsh criticism to those people by placing negative label as a bad guys on them all at once. So they ended up, accepting it meekly by giving up their complaint that they suffered loss by a restaurant or companies. So that's why Japanese people keep secrets. Even if there is something wrong with the food provided of restaurants, because they care too much about how they are thought by peer pressure around them. So if they want to complain about this strongly, about this matter, they probably strongly decide to never ever go to the restaurant forever. So, and to make matter worse, Japanese companies take a free ride on this situation, and some big companies tend to attribute the cause of product deficiency to customers who complain about it to them. Like, this is all your fault, because this is all your usage problem. So that's why this product was broken, or something like that. This is almost harassment from a servicer to a customer. So without realizing it, some Japanese companies have fallen into amateurish business, and they are far away from customer creed policy. Japanese people's sense of discrimination makes people easily get caught up in the stereotype and conservativeness and makes them difficult to realize unreasonability from it. So this is one of the reasons that Japan can't catch up with the speed of world innovation smoothly. So the viewpoint of acceptance of diversity is decisively missing from a Japanese society.